Thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Lucky Brain Tumor Podcast. I'm Emily Truell, and I am delighted to have with me today Maggie. Thank you for joining us, Maggie.
Thanks for having me, Emily.
So, Maggie, I know you were diagnosed with an acoustic neuroma. Can you tell me a little bit about what that was like for you?
Sure. About New Year's in 2022, I started noticing that I was hearing this whooshing sound in my ear every time my heart beat. And then a little later, noticed I was feeling I kind of wonky. I just kind of off. And I'd had sinus problems some years before that. And so I thought, well, I should go down to my ENT. Maybe they're back. He told me they might come back. I went down there and told him what was going on. He said, oh, we should do an MRI. And he never said brain tumor. He never said, it certainly was not on my radar. I didn't want to have an MRI because I hate having MRIs. And I said, well, can't you just look up my nose or something? And he said, no, we really need to do an MRI. And I thought, well, okay, we'll do this because I do want to know what it is. And 2 days later, they called me and asked me to come back down. I live pretty rurally. And so it was an hour drive back down there. And I remember him coming into the room, waving the report, saying, again, remember, brain tumor was like not on the radar. He said, remember, it's benign, it's benign. And I went, okay. And he says, you have a brain tumor. And I said, oh my God. He said, it's benign. I said, well, can you just go up my nose and get it? And he goes, no, you have to go to a medical center or something. And so I went down to Stanford and had testing and all that stuff. And I was, it sort of sunk in slowly, the whole implications of everything and my options available to me. So I was, at least the anxiety came on pretty slowly, I guess I could say. Yeah. And from there, yeah, that's what it was like.
You were kind of in shock to start with, so you didn't even really
Yeah.
realize what was happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like I said, it was so out of left field.
Yes. Yeah, I think we all feel that way. And I think oftentimes when you tell someone you have a brain tumor, they're like, "Oh my goodness, like can you function?" And you're like, "I didn't even know." And so that's the thing about something like a brain tumor. You don't really have a realistic picture because it's so wide how you can be
Yeah.
impacted.
Yeah. And it's such an emotionally charged word, right? When you think of brain tumor, you think of people dying and cancer and all that stuff. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
How large was your tumor when you were diagnosed?
It was about 1.1, 1.2.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then
So
what did
kind of the upper side of small.
upper side of small? Yeah. So then what did you choose for your treatment, or did you decide to watch and wait since it was on the smaller side?
Well, I started being followed at Stanford, and I went down, and my doctor said, "Yeah, you can do watch and wait, and some people really improve with vestibular rehab, a special kind of physical therapy to help with your balance and perception and all that stuff." And I said, "Yeah, sign me up." And so I did, vestibular prehab before surgery, and was going to do 6 months of watch and wait. But about 4 months in, I noticed I had an increase. I also had some ringing in my ears, just regular ringing. And it kind of freaked me out. And so I went back down, and they actually did another MRI and another hearing test. And the hearing test was a little bit worse, and the MRI was sort of inconclusive about whether it was bigger or not, but maybe. And I just went, I can't do this, I need to deal with it. And so I decided to have surgery.
Okay. And what surgical approach did the doctors recommend?
Well, I actually consulted with 5 surgeons before I decided what to do. I mean, who to have do it, because it is
Yeah.
your brain after all. And the thing that made me really crazy was I got 2 different recommendations. Some doctors recommended retrosigmoid approach, and then other 1 or 2 other surgeons recommended middle fossa, and that just made me crazy. It was like it was hard enough to make the decision to have brain surgery. Usually, that's kind of an unusual thing to actually, I mean, you could have radiation, right? You could just walk in, have one, as little as one treatment, leave and go have lunch with your girlfriends and be done, for that, as opposed to this multi-hour long ordeal with months and months of recuperation. So it's kind of it was that was pretty crazy making too, to make that decision. So
Yeah, it's really hard when the doctors don't all agree, but it's really important, like you said, it is your brain to like talk to all the different doctors. That's so important. And I think sometimes we're kind of trained by the medical system to just like take what the doctor says and do it. And I totally agree with what you said. It's your brain. Like there's really nothing more important. And so, in a situation like yours where the tumor isn't huge, you have time, like that is such a great thing to do, to take the time and talk to all the doctors.
yeah.
So tell me about how you got comfortable and made that decision.
Well, uh I chose surgery over radiation because I actually have a really ridiculous family history of cancer. My mother was one of 12 children, and all but two of them had cancer. My father had cancer. I had a brother that had cancer. I've had cancer. And so surgery seemed to be kind of a better option, even though, there was recommendations because of my age to go with the radiation route. At the time, I did a lot of research because I was really invested in getting my balance back, improving my balance. And, things I read were not terribly conclusive, but there was some leanings toward, oh, people might have better outcomes having surgery with their balance. And which actually has had, there's now, a couple of years later, if you look at like the research of Dr. Matt Carlson at Mayo Clinic, he says don't make treatment decisions based on your symptoms, because the symptoms you have going in are going to be the symptoms you have going out, which is true a lot of the times, but not all the time. And but he's been doing studies on quality of life for over 20 years, and so I mean he really has a focus on that. And anyway, so I thought that would give me the best chance of getting my balance back on track. And I'm just the idea of I told you I don't like MRIs, and I thought, if I have radiation, I'm going to have MRIs every 6 months for a long time, because the tumor has to shrink and they have to monitor it. And having that drawn out period of not knowing is not in alignment with my personality. I just wanted it done. And my age, I didn't feel like if I waited or, did something else, did radiation, that I was going to be, I'm not going to be a better surgical candidate 5 years from now, though, I wasn't a bad surgical candidate that, I'm still not, but yeah.
Right.
And
And
I'm
then
just not a, yeah.
the tumor just grows too. So you get older and the tumor grows. And so both of those things might make the surgery more complex as time goes on.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, definitely. So, yeah.
So which surgical approach did you choose? You said you were given two options.
Well, my doctors at Stanford they were adamant. They said, no, no, we would do retrosig on you. And here's why. I actually had a consult with both surgeons, and Dr. Chang was the neurosurgeon, and he really spent some time with me looking over the scans and explaining why retrosig was a preferred approach. Even though, I mean, all three approaches have pros and cons. It's not like you have to really weigh, your individual circumstance, and because everybody's different.
And everyone's tumor is different and in a different location and attached to different things. So it's
Yeah.
complicated.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's really hard how it's your decision because it feels
Yeah.
like it should be above your pay grade.
Yes. Yes. It's like, just tell me.
Shouldn't there be a right answer? I mean, the good news, if there isn't a right answer, is that there also isn't a wrong answer, but it
Yeah.
feels like there should be.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. It didn't help that I had, that I had a pretty close to, and after I'd made the decision to have surgery, there was maybe a resident or a fellow or somebody at Stanford came in and like sort of tried to talk me into surgery. I mean, into radiation. And I was like, oh man, no, I'm not, I know there's indications for that, but I'm not going to do that, but you really do have to do your homework and be your own advocate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, the best advice I got from any doctor in my acoustic neuroma journey was make the choice that you can live with and then don't look back. Because
Yes.
ultimately you're the one who has to live with it. And so I think
Yeah.
that's great that were factoring in what was right for you and what you really needed.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So, what did your recovery feel like? How did that go?
It went really well. My surgery was 6 hours. I remember waking up briefly, being wheeled out of the OR with a lot of people around me. I went into ICU, which I'm not sure I would have gone into ICU. Everybody goes into ICU, but I guess my blood pressure was a little high during surgery, and so they wanted to keep a special eye on me or something. And so I went. I was in ICU, and I was there less than 48 hours. And then they sent me home. And I had no,
Wow.
I,
Wow.
and I had, this is the truth. I have had dental procedures that hurt more. I had no nausea. I had no headaches. I had no paralysis. I did have vertigo. I mean, I did have dizziness, and I still do have balance problems. Those did not go away. Um, and but I live about a 5 hour drive from Stanford, so we made the decision to take a room in an extended stay place just across the bay from Stanford in case I developed a CSF leak, a cerebral spinal fluid leak. I didn't want to be out in the middle of nowhere where I live and have one of those, and that was a good decision. But I was up walking around, I was walking around the next day. Um, I uh, I was driving within a few weeks. And driving is actually something I really enjoy because that's probably the time that I feel the most normal is when I drive, um, and hiking and doing the things I normally do. So the recovery was good. I did a lot of this. I did an 8 week, another eight. I can't remember if I did 8 weeks of vestibular therapy, and I was that before or after surgery? I can't even remember now. But I did a full program at Stanford, uh, mostly via Zoom, and I really was religious about that. I was very motivated to to get my balance back. To have, I have oscillopsia, so that means when I walk, things move that shouldn't be moving. And I also get like supermarket syndrome, which is where when you go into especially a big store like a Costco or a big supermarket and you're walking down the aisles, it's very disorienting and because there's so much visual stimuli. So I have to be careful with that. So the first time I went into a grocery store 6 days post-op, and I my husband had to actually come into the front door with the car because I couldn't walk to the car after that. And I love grocery stores though, but so I've learned how to kind of deal with that a little bit. Yeah.
That's amazing. Your recovery story is amazing. Now, granted, I had some complications, but I was in the hospital for 10 days.
Oh my
So like
gosh.
you saying that you were in the grocery store on day 6, I'm like, what? Like I can't even imagine. That's
Yeah.
phenomenal. And the grocery store is hard. Like that is not an easy like start task when you talk about the balance and the just sort of the sensory stimulation, it's very overwhelming.
Yeah.
Um, so that is phenomenal, and I'm so happy for you that that went so well, and you had such fantastic results. That's definitely not everybody's story, so that's
No.
really great.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think I caught if you mentioned, did you retain your hearing with your retrosigmoid approach?
That's really interesting. I had mild hearing loss going in. They told me that the neurosurgeon came in the next morning or something, or maybe that evening, I don't remember. And he said, we're not real optimistic about your hearing because we lost a signal during surgery. But walking around after surgery at the hotel, I could localize sound and I felt like I could hear. So when I went back for my 6-day follow up to get my staples out and everything, and they did a hearing test, and I did have serviceable hearing in my left ear, which is the side of my AN was on. And then a year ago, October, actually 2 years post-op, I became single-sided deaf, just out of the blue. Yeah, which I think is pretty unusual. I don't know if that happens I'm the only person I know that happened to. Um, so yeah, so now I am single-sided deaf, and it's only been about a little over a year.
Wow. Yeah, that's really hard. That's really emotional, right? Because you're on this roller coaster of like hoping to save your hearing and, choosing a surgical approach where you have the possibility, but like maybe you don't save it and then you do save and then you lose it. That's a challenging battle and a challenging journey of emotions going every which way.
Yeah,
I did just read in the most recent Acoustic Neuroma Association notes that there's some discussion about the tumor creates like a microclimate that damages your hearing. And so I wonder if it's some piece of that
yeah,
that was a part of your kind of delayed hearing loss because obviously that area of your body was impacted by the things the tumor did. And so maybe some of that was still a part of it. But that is a very unique story for sure.
yeah. Who knows? I'm a registered nurse, so I understand medical things maybe a little better than most people, and I'm fascinated by all this. I'm sorry I'm the subject of it, but the whole vestibular system and balance thing is fascinating to me, and yet I don't have a clue. I don't understand. I mean, the whole oscillopsia thing and your vestibular ocular reflexes and how that all works. Why did I lose my hearing a year out? Why do I have oscillopsia? I don't, I've taken a fairly deep dive into that, and I still don't have a definitive explanation. I don't seem to get one from people I talk to. So that's, it's like, okay, I'm just gonna let the universe, have its way.
Yeah. So are there tools or coping mechanisms that you use to help you day to day with your balance struggles?
That's also interesting. Just about 6 weeks ago, I normally, I'm really lucky. I look totally normal. If you saw me walk, unless you're super trained, you would never notice. I do many things that I love, including hiking, canoeing. I chop wood. It's like I garden. I have to modulate all that, but I'm so fortunate, really. And so about 6 weeks ago, I got up in the morning and I went downstairs and I went, wow, I'm really off balance today, like really off balance. And so, you know, I don't know if you have balance issues, but you learn to compensate. You learn to make accommodation for what you need to do. Like you pay a little bit extra attention when you're stepping over things, or you step, a little. And before 6 weeks ago, it was kind of an aggravation. But I dealt with it, but for some reason my balance took a dive 6 weeks ago, and I actually fell. There was the first time I've fallen as a result of balance issues, and so that was kind of freaky because I also have osteoporosis. But and it hasn't gotten any better. So I'm newly dealing with actually feeling a little bit disabled. And again, I know, people say, oh, you look great, you must be totally recovered. I've only fallen that once, but it's more of a constant reminder about having to be careful, and there's a whole kind of visual component that's really not a lot of fun. um, so yes, to compensate, I'm just more careful. I work really hard on my balance. I do balance exercises most every day. I try to challenge myself. I try to keep doing everything that I normally do. and I think there's a little bit more fatigue associated with that now. And so I have to, and that's probably the hardest thing for me. I think I was probably born with twice as much energy as people half my age to start. So that's a good thing. Even though it's cut in half, it's still pretty normal. But um uh but I have to be careful about, my activity, and I don't know how it is for you, but you don't, I don't know I've overdone it until it's too late. And so you have to go, okay. And I'm never, that's a really hard thing for me to like say, okay, I feel like doing this, but I can't. Or yeah, I would love to go here and do this, but this will be the fourth day in a row that I've gone out, and that's too much. So I'm going to have, I call them jammy days. I'm going to have a jammy day where I just kind of hang out at home and do home stuff. Um, and it's and it's much, much better than it was. I had a period of really severe fatigue before surgery. And then, I had fatigue after surgery, but I would say within 6 months, I was back up to about, I don't know, 90%. But then you have the overlay of like, I just turned 70. So how much of it is age anyway, and how much of it is, so there's a whole process of me just personally learning, that I have physical limits and I'm getting older. I have this condition that plays into it. But I do have to, I limit, being in large groups of people with a lot of noise, obviously, is a challenge. So I just have to, it's a big lesson for me on a lot of levels. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's really challenging about that is it's not always the same day to day, right? So like
Right.
if you knew exactly how much, you could be like, okay, I can budget it. I'll have this much energy. I'll do this, 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 and that'll be great. And it's like, okay, you can do this, this, and this today, but then tomorrow you could only do two things, and then you're
Yes.
done.
Yes.
And you don't realize it till you've overdone, and then you're like, well, shucks, like I
Yeah.
thought I had this planned out so good. But it's like a target that moves all the time,
Yes.
and you're trying to do life to the best of your ability without overdoing it, and but also not to lose ground, right? So you don't want to just
Right.
like pull way back and not do any of the things that you want to do.
Right.
It's it's so hard. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
It
It's
is.
a real, real challenge, and balance is extraordinarily fatiguing. I think that hearing loss is fatiguing, but balance is much, much worse. And when my balance is not in a good place, I'm I'm worn to the bone real quick. So I certainly understand that. I know, for me, some things that I've used is, like using a hiking stick when
Yes.
hiking
Yes.
and like different things like that to modify it, but like still do the activity, but feel a little bit safer with like that extra touch point to
Yes.
just give you that reference point of where you are in
Yes.
space.
This is the ground. Here's the
Yeah.
ground. This is the ground. Yeah.
Yes. Because it
I,
literally in vestibular therapy, they were talking about like a pinky touching gives your body more information that makes it easier. And it's literally true. Like one more finger or, barefoot versus shoes, like makes such a difference because you have that information. And
yes.
so sometimes for balance things, I'll do those little modifications to help. My balance is mostly good. But I would say I have a weakness there. I have to compensate. I have to be aware. And if I'm tired or I'm sick, it's going to be the first thing out the door.
Yes.
And I want to be extra careful then because, anything that makes balance harder, I know I'm more likely to lose my balance in the first place. And it's not the time to go up a ladder if I've had a big day, if I go up the
No.
ladder at all. So those sorts of things, all play into it. Wanted to circle back because you had talked about liking to drive, and I think that's fascinating that you like to drive with this balance issue because I personally find driving very fatiguing because of the way, like, especially at night with the lights coming towards me, it can be hard to orient in space. And I've read some articles about this being a thing when you have balance disorders or like Meniere's and different things that are like acoustic neuromas. And so it's fascinating to me that you enjoy driving so much because that's actually on like the list of things that I always found hard, but since my tumor, I find it extra hard. I still do it, but it tires me much quicker.
Yeah, I drive. We actually just drove to Minnesota, which is a 4-day drive. And we did it in September. And I did a lot of the driving. I and it makes no sense, because you think about supermarket syndrome with all this stuff on the aisles flashing by. Well, that's kind of the same thing that happens when you're driving, right? You have all that stuff going by in your periphery, but it doesn't, and I can turn around and look. I don't that doesn't I mean, I notice that it's different. It's not an but I it's not something where I'm going woo, or anything like that. It's not. If I had to do it every 30 seconds, that'd be a different story, but I don't. Yeah, I it makes it's just one of the other things that makes no sense.
Yeah. But I mean, isn't that amazing? Like, and that's why sometimes I think when people are diagnosed, they really want to know, like, what is it going to be like? And it's so hard to say what it's going to be like because everyone's path is so unique.
Yeah.
And, one person has this issue and the next person does not, and they, have these other concerns. So, that's very fascinating. But, uh, I did also want to mention in the most recent acoustic neuroma notes, I'm just going to plug that a couple more times because it is such a good resource.
It is a great publication. Oh my
It's so
gosh.
good.
Yeah.
There was an article about vestibular therapy, and they were saying how when you are someone who had an acoustic neuroma, you might find that there are multiple times in your life that you need to go back to that because of some change, because we have this weakness and this issue. And so I thought that was very fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
hadn't
did.
really occurred to me.
Oh, I mean, to start vestibular therapy over again, to restart
Hmm.
it. Yeah. I never really know. I'm one of those weird people. I never really noticed improvement with it, even though I was religious for weeks. I've probably done a million shake and nods, and I have little X's on Post-its all over the house. I just maybe I'm just not really good at noticing that because it's hard. You're in your body all the time, and the change it's hard to quantify. And so I quit doing all the gaze stabilization stuff, So I don't, but I've taken it back up, It's because, like, okay, I'm gonna double down. I'm gonna do everything I possibly can do, but it can take weeks before you see any kind of progress or anything. And I haven't seen anything. I mean, working on your balance, that's a different thing. Your balance and your strength, that's really important for everybody, for fall prevention and all that kind of stuff. But your balance does improve. I have a G board. Do you know what those are?
Yeah.
It's like yeah, so it's like a slack line. And when I first got it, I couldn't even balance on one foot on it for 2 seconds, and now, at least until recently, I was able to walk, take a step forward and then backwards on the slack line. And so that was big. And I still can sort of do it, but it's just not as good as 6 weeks ago. So
Wow. Yeah.
who knows?
So, as you've gone through this experience, was there something that you found that really helped you deal with your diagnosis?
I think there was several things. One is just really becoming educated and taking control of what was happening to me and making those decisions, and not just saying, following what doctors told me. Not, they're experts, and you want to have the best you can get, but you need to really follow your gut and trust it. That helped. I'm a woman of action, and so it really helped to take steps and feel like I was directing what was happening. I also I have a really great support system. My husband is amazing, and I have, a wide circle of friends and family. And I read Peggy Huddleston's book on healing from surgery, and she did some research. I can't remember whether it was Kaiser or one of the universities, maybe it was Harvard or something, but she wrote a book about anxiety and healing, and how you actually it impedes healing. It impedes the physical if you're anxious. And so I said, okay, I'm going to have my head cut open, but I'm going to be in a really good space about this before I do. And so I worked really hard on that, and read the book, and really developed a positive attitude about what was going on. And, there's another doctor that talks about assembling your A team. Like if you're not somebody who likes to do research, find somebody who'll do it for you. If you're not good at making doctor appointments or your mind goes blank every time you're in the office with the doctor, bring somebody with you to take notes. Have an A team. And another thing that she suggested was when you're going into surgery, have people send you good wishes at the time that you're supposed to be rolled into the OR. And so I did that, which was hard for me. It was like I called people up. I said, "Will you send me, prayers and good juju at 8:30 in the morning on this day because I'm going in for brain surgery?" And so I had about 20 people doing that, and and I told the surgeon, I said, "Hey, there," and then another kind of funny thing was one of my friends. I live in a town that actually has a Buddhist abbey, and so she is a participant there, and so she contacted the Buddhist monks, and so on top of the people that I had lined up, there was 25 Buddhist monks who were sending out while I was going in. So I told the surgeon that, and he smiled, and so that was good. Whatever works, whatever feels right for you is it's important to make happen.
I love that. I love the support. And I think asking for support can be so hard, but it's really important. It's important for you. You deserve that support. And it's also important for your loved ones to be given tasks to do because they all want to do something. And if you
Yeah.
can give them something they can do, that's really empowering. And it's really
Yes.
great.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So, if you could pass along a piece of advice to someone who is diagnosed with an acoustic neuroma, what would you advise them? What would be the thing that you would tell them?
Um, well, like I said, trust your gut, you know, and be, like you said, be at peace with your decision. It's like, because would I've been better off having had radiation? Would I have been better off having a different surgeon? Would I have been better off doing something else? I'll never know, right? And so, on some levels, this is one big crap shot, excuse my French. And but it can be an educated one, and it can be one that you can make peace with. And so you need to do that, and you need to trust who you who your care team is. It's like I remember being wheeled into the OR, and this was totally out of the blue. This feeling is like I was like so relieved, like to be handing it over to somebody. I felt like there's no more, I don't have to do any more research. I don't have to go to any more appointments. It's now in somebody else's hands, in the hands of people that I trust. And so that is something else. And to really know that I'm on a Facebook page with acoustic neuroma patients, and we're always saying to each other, "You got this," and you know you do have this, and you will make it through it. It doesn't, having an acoustic neuroma informs who I am, but it doesn't define who I am. It's definitely a, life 2.0, but it doesn't define me. So
Yes, I love that. And I think when you're first diagnosed, you kind of feel like it does. And it takes a certain point in recovery of like getting back to your own life and feeling like you are more than a diagnosis.
yes,
And I think that's such an important step to take. And it can take a little bit of time, and you might have to go through some stages of grief. But eventually, it's not your whole story, it's just a chapter.
that's right. Yeah. And life is good. Life is
Yeah.
good.
Well, thank you so much, Maggie. This was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you. I'm so glad. I think people's stories are really important. Our stories are all different, but I think it's important that we hear each other's stories and that we have the chance to tell them too.
Yes, they're both important. The
Yes.
opportunity to share and the opportunity to hear.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Thanks.